So Robert Downey Jr., he doesn't let his past define who he is, even though he had made mistakes and he had failed in a few ways. He kept going. And what do we do when our setback is failure? And how do we respond to that? And I just want to do a little experiment here. I think that we all have experienced failure, right? And I just want to find out. So could you all just stand for me really quick? Just stand. And so I'm going to read some things. And if you haven't done these things, I want you to sit down. So doctors say you should drink 8 glasses of water a day. So if you don't do that, you can have a seat, okay? So, all right. For you guys that keep hydrated, good job. So, dentists say you should brush after every meal and floss every day. If you don't do that, you can have a seat. All right. So, car specialists say that you should never allow your gas tank to go below half full. All right. So, there are a lot of things, that we... Is anybody still standing? I think everybody's going. All right, so me too. I'd be sitting down. There's a lot of things that we can fail at. I brought some of my own. One day I was wanting cookies, and I pictured this, but what I made looked kind of like this. This was it right here, dirt roaster. Yeah, I didn't eat those. I threw them away. Kids wouldn't eat them either because they look at them. So, or one time Courtney was going to do a DIY piñata. And that's a picture of Paisley with it. And if a closer look, you can see the one she made and the real one. It had candy in it, though. It worked. That would be a fail. Or trying to take a picture of your kiddos. Maybe you want to do that, but it doesn't turn out quite like, you want it. Or maybe you wanted to be in an 80s rock band, and that wouldn't happen. So if you don't know, that's Chad Skelly over here. He looks like Axl Rose or something. But we all have failed in some sort of way, right? And so this is a message that we all can hear, that we all can take. And we're going to look at Mark 6 to talk about what Jesus does during failure. And as I read this, the first thing he does is, he's not afraid of it, and he accepts it. So Mark 6:1 says this: Jesus left and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's the wisdom that has been given to him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and his own home. He cannot do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people, and he was amazed by their lack of faith. So Jesus goes to his hometown to try to perform miracles and do things. They have a lack of faith. It doesn't turn out exactly how he wanted it to turn out. And it does say that he did heal a few people, and if he didn't go, that never would have happened. If he didn't go to his hometown, but he did. So sometimes, failure is just going to happen, and we cannot be afraid of that. Any of you use text messaging? Anybody, if you do, raise your hand. Let me just see, okay? Most people, right? I remember a commercial that came on TV in about 2001. And it was for texting. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it. It comes on and it has this dude and he texts, hey, how's it going, to another person, and then they respond back. I thought during this commercial, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. This will never catch on. Texting is going to be, it's never going to happen. I was way wrong, right? We all do it. And here's the thing, these guys that came up with this idea, they could have thought, this is never going to catch on. It's not going to work, but they didn't. They tried something new, and it worked. I was at New Life Christian, and before that, I was at this church. It was called Paley Christian, and we had done this thing called the Grand March. It was for prom students. So we would have the prom students come into a building like this, and the whole community would come out. Someone would announce their name. They would come up here with their date, and we would say, "This is little Johnny and Susan," and everybody would clap their hands and because they were dressed well. Well, I wanted to do that at New Life Christian. So I got three ladies I picked out. I picked out Rebecca Schartzer, Kelly Wells, and Rebecca Klusmeyer. And I said, "Hey, here's my idea. Can you do this?" And they said, "We'll do it. Let us talk about it. We'll come back to you." So the next week I come and I talk to them and they say, "Hey, we're going to do it, but you know what you were talking about and the people coming in here and stuff, scratch that. We're not going to do what you want us to. What we are going to do is out in our field, we're going to put like a Corvette, a Amish buggy. We're going to put different things where the kids can come and get their pictures taken, and we're going to ask vendors to come and be there to give away free stuff." When they told me that, I thought, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. I told you the winning plan, and you're not going with it. And I didn't tell them that, but I thought, well, I guess we'll just see how this goes. I was afraid it was going to fail, right? They did it. This is the best thing ever. Seriously, it was awesome. And we did it again the next year. So if I was afraid of that failure, and I was, but I kept going, that never would have happened. And sometimes new things in life can't happen for us because we're in this rut, we're afraid of failure, and we don't want to try again. Maybe you've got married, and for some reason it didn't work out, and you're afraid to get married again. I know people like that. Maybe you filled out another college application and it didn't get accepted. You turned in another resume and you didn't get the job. You have an addiction and you've had a relapse. And then sometimes instead of trying something new or trying something different, we're afraid and we just don't. But we'll see Jesus was not afraid of failure. He went into his hometown and he tried to witness to these people anyway. So, accept it. Don't be afraid of it. And number 2 is keep focused. Don't get discouraged. Okay, it says in 6, he was amazed at their lack of faith. And then in 7 it says, then Jesus went around teaching from village to village, calling the 12 to him. He began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So, even though this happens, like Jesus, you can see that this isn't going to work out, he comes up with a different plan. The first thing I want you to know is he was amazed by their lack of faith. So, don't get discouraged. Losing hope, losing confidence, losing courage, and becoming discouraged is something that happens when we have failure. You're not sure how much you can keep going. Being discouraged isn't something you can see or touch. It doesn't have a weight. But when you get like that, especially through failures, it sure weighs you down. So when he says lack of faith, it shows that Jesus had extreme disappointment. This reveals Jesus' side of humanity, that Jesus was a human and experienced, but he was also God, emotions like we do. Hebrews 2:14 and 17 says, therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he likewise shared in their humanity, so that through death he could destroy the one who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and set free those who were held in slavery all their lives by fear or death. So Jesus can sympathize with us because he is human and he knows emotions. He knows how we feel. Not everything is like that. My wife sometimes, I notice she'll get with a group of ladies and they'll talk about when they were pregnant. And they'll talk about things like how long they were sick for. I threw up for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. I got this big. I had these problems or whatever. And a lot of times when that happens, I'll come into the conversation and I'll say, hey, it was pretty terrible. I mean, Courtney got sick a lot and she got real big and she was really grumpy, and the ladies give me like a death stare, because I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I ain't never been pregnant, so she has. I can't add to that conversation. But Jesus, when it comes to emotions and things that we go through, disappointments, failures, He knows what that's like. That's why he came here. That's why he was on earth, so he could experience things like we do, to be tempted, different things. Like Jesus knows what you're going through. So, people didn't believe in him. He was amazed at their lack of faith. But he still had something for them. You know, this is my sister-in-law, Janessa. Like, that's a picture of her. That's Courtney and I. And Janessa, when I showed up on the scene and dated Courtney, she was probably 11 years old or so. So I've known her forever. She's like my sister. She really is like my sister. I remember one time her mom asked me she was going to the store and there was a boy over there. She's like 13. Could you watch Janessa and this boy? Make sure. It's like, sure. So that boy was holding her hand, you know, and I thought, that little pervert, like I could just kill him, you know, like, because I didn't want people, you know, she was like my sister. I loved her. Like, so anyway, so that's her. Like high school, you know, I was there through the whole high school period, and she was, you can show that next picture. She was a cheerleader. You know, she was smart. She had a good smile. She was bright, you know, and somewhere, I want to say around her senior year, like, that started to like go kind of a different direction. Her smile wasn't as big, the light wasn't as bright, and I think her life was going a little bit different than what, you know, she wanted it to go. You know, so she has a kid named Hayden. You know, in this time, Hayden's awesome. We love Hayden. And Janessa, you know, ends up living at her mom's with her child, trying to go to college, trying to work a job. You know, she's not making a lot of money. It's hard for her getting through college. Seems like disappointment and failure is kind of everywhere. I remember at this time seeing it was like Janessa wore pajama pants every day. You know, that was just the kind of mood, you know, that she was in. She was having a hard time. So I talked to her, and she said, and I didn't realize, she said one day, like she was at her dad's, and she prayed to God, like, can you come in to my story? Basically, can you come into my failures? Can you do that? And she met a guy named Josh, and this is the picture of him. And I got to be honest, when they said that Janessa had met a good man, I remember like talking. So Janessa, you know, she's single, or she has a kid. She's working a job, not making a lot of money. You know, there might be a little bit of baggage there. And they tell us about Josh, and I remember telling Courtney, I remember saying like, hey, I wonder what's wrong with him. You know, like things, you know. And truth is, like, nothing's wrong with him. Here's the thing about Josh: like, Josh loves Jesus and he loves Janessa, and that's really what she needed. You know, like, so he comes into her life, and he starts treating her like she should be treated. He starts loving her. So you have Janessa. She invites Jesus into her failures, into her story. And then you have this man, Josh, that comes in that loves Jesus. And now it's her, Jesus, and Josh. And they get married. They have a kid named Mason. You know, so she was living at home, not making a lot of money, trying to go to college. But then, you know, her story kind of changed. Now, she's doing well. Now, Janessa, like, through the time I've known her, like, she was going to college. And there was a time, like, when she was living at home that I thought, you know, I just don't know what's going to happen here. We used to pray for her. We used to, like, want her to be okay. We didn't want anything to happen. So I remember her doing that in college, and, like, this, being honest, I thought, well, this isn't going to happen. Like, she's not going to finish this. And, like, this is her. I never thought this would happen. So, like, setbacks, failures, things happen. And if I say to her, what happened? She doesn't give her testimony to Josh, although she loves him. She doesn't give her testimony to her children. She says, There was one day I was at my dad's, and I prayed that God would come into my story. And he did. And I don't know, like, things could have been different, right? I mean, things, you know, maybe Josh didn't come, and he did, but maybe he didn't. But she still had Jesus in the story. I mean, it still would have been okay, but, like, She ended up, through her failures, not letting disappointment overtake her, where she just gives up. You know how that feels? You give up, and you just don't feel like you can keep going. God is in our story. In Isaiah 40:29, it says, God gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, He increases strength. You know, if you're here today and you're discouraged and you don't know what you're going to do, man, God can give you strength. He gives strength to the weak. If you know Him, He can increase your strength. He can help you keep going. But you have to invite Him into that story. So don't get discouraged. Invite God into the story and keep moving when you fail. And point 3, we see that He restructures. Jesus did something different. He wasn't in the synagogue anymore. It said that He was going from place to place to anybody that was listening. He wasn't doing the same thing. So doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is what? Insanity, right? Yeah. So, and that's true. Courtney and I sometimes will have, like, I don't know, because you're married too, you know, if sometimes we have communication problems. You know, I told you one time, like, when we were first married, I came home, she'd been cleaning all day, and she said, honey, I've been cleaning all day. And I said, where? And, don't do that to me. Like, it didn't go well, you know. So I feel bad enough. Shame. But I said that to her, and it didn't work. So we went to this, like, marriage retreat, and sometimes, you know, where we have problems focusing back and forth, and they say, well, we want you to try this. And so they're trying to tell us a different way to communicate. We want you to do this. We want you to turn to your wife. So I turn to my wife. People are watching me, and I feel like a goof, you know. Like, we want Courtney, you to tell Chris how you feel if he doesn't help with the children, you know. And she starts talking, you know. Chris, I feel, and then I try to interrupt, and the lady says, nope, your job's to listen. You're not waiting to talk, but you're listening to her. So she would say, Chris, like, when you don't help with the children, I feel sad. I feel like I'm doing this alone. And then they pointed at me and said, we want you to repeat that back to her, what she just said. So I did, you know, and we did this through conversation. And then at the end, like, Courtney cries. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, I feel like you really hurt me. And I did. And I thought, well, this actually worked. Like, this is totally different than, like, what we've done before. It wasn't the same. And, like, a lot of times when we're in a rut and we failed and failures among us, like, we just keep doing the same thing over and over. We don't get out of that. We just keep doing it. And if we want something different, we got to do something different. You got to do something that you've never done before if you want a different circumstance. And my last thing is Jesus used that failure. The failure at His hometown signaled the beginning of the apostles' journey. He sent them out. It said they went and there were demons and stuff that they cast out, and they healed people. This failure led to something great. And in your life, it can do that too. You know, He says to shake the dust off your feet, and that's weird, you know, talking about going to someone's house, and if they don't accept you, shake the dust off your feet and leave. So that statement was a law, and it said that dust from a Gentile or a pagan country was defiled. A Jew walking back into his own country from one of these was to purge himself of any dust that might be on his clothing. So Jesus in that was not saying to quit when it gets rough or to reject those who reject you. Jesus was saying go in spite of your failures. And do you have dust on your feet, dust from past failures, ineffectiveness, or incomplete plans that you need to shake off and you need to keep going? Philippians 3:13 says, brothers and sisters, I know that I have not yet reached that goal, but there is one thing I always do, forgetting the past and straining toward what is ahead. Listen, you don't have to let your failures define who you are. You know, I think sometimes, especially like Jesus, when He was in His hometown, the people knew who He was. They knew that He was a carpenter's son and that His mom was Mary, and supposedly she was a virgin and got pregnant, you know, and they probably looked down on Him a little bit. They knew Him. And sometimes when we fail, people know us and they know what we're going through. You and it's really easy to focus on those people. I remember when I was going through a hard time and people would say things to me. I had a girl in youth group, and she would say, I want to pray for Chris today because he's smoking pot. She would say that out loud, and I would think, I can never go back to church now. She would say that, and people would say, they weren't very nice to me, and it wasn't those people that I remember the most. This old lady one time at church grabbed me by my face, okay? She pulled me in close, and she said, don't you let people make you think God doesn't have something special for your life. And for you guys, too, I don't know what you're going through, but don't think God doesn't have something special for you, because He does. Whatever failure you've had, you can get through it. Invite God into that story. He can help. In closing, my wife, sometimes when I'm driving, I don't know if your wife does this, she'll give me directions. I'll be driving, she'll say, hey, go right, and I'll turn right. Go left, and I'll go left. And then she'll say, I don't know where we're at. And I'll say, you told me directions confidently, you said. I'm like, you knew where we were going, and we end up somewhere where we don't know exactly where we're at. And, for some of you, that's your life, We have this thing called a GPS, and we can hook it in now. It tells us exactly where to go most of the time. And we get there usually with no problems. For some of you, you might be going different ways, the wrong direction. There's failure everywhere. You have no idea how you got here, but you have not plugged into the GPS, which is God. The one that can guide your life, the one that can come into your story, the one that can help you the most. And today, whatever you're going through, whatever failure that might be, I invite you to invite Him into your story. This means nothing. All this stuff means nothing if He's not in that with you. Okay? So today, whatever it is, I will be in the back. Frank will be in the back. Anybody that's back there, they're here to pray for you today. They want to come into your story too. They want to pray for you. We want to walk with you, whatever it is. Webby will be up here. If you want to pray with him, same way you can. If you want to get baptized today, you can do that. If you don't know Jesus, you can meet Him, or even if you want to just join this church, you can do that. But again, whatever failure you're going through today, let God come into that story. Let someone pray with you today.